I never thought I'd be the one telling a story like this. I mean, I've heard other people's so-called near-death experiences, but I always brushed them off as hallucinations, wishful thinking, or the brain playing tricks as it shuts down. That's what I believed, until it happened to me. My name is James Smith. I'm a veteran, a man who lived by logic, discipline, and cold, hard reality. I didn't have time for religion, let alone fairy tales about heaven and hell. If you couldn't see it, touch it, or hear it, it wasn't real. That's what I told myself. That's what I built my entire life around. But I died. I flatlined. And in that moment, I realized how wrong I was. Because when I crossed over, I came face to face with something I never expected. Something that shattered everything I thought I knew. I stood before God Himself, and I asked Him a question that had haunted me for years. Was Jesus really your son? His answer. It terrified me, and now I can't stay silent. I have to tell you what I saw, because whether you believe me or not, what I learned on the other side will change everything. To understand why this shook me to my core, you need to know the kind of man I was before it happened. I wasn't an atheist. I believed in something out there, some kind of higher power. But religion, that was another story. I had seen too much in my life to believe in a loving God who actually cared about what happened to us down here. I served in the military for over 20 years, deployed in places where hell wasn't just an idea. It was a real, living thing. I watched good men die. I saw families torn apart by war. I witnessed evil in ways most people couldn't stomach. And through it all, I wondered, if Jesus exists, why does He allow this? When I came back home, I wasn't the same. Sure, I looked fine on the outside. I held a steady job, paid my bills, kept my life and family together. But inside, I was numb. The world I returned to didn't make sense to me anymore. People cared about things that felt so meaningless. Celebrity gossip, internet trends, arguing over politics like it actually mattered. Meanwhile, I couldn't close my eyes without hearing the sounds of gunfire, the cries of the wounded, the memories of all the faces I lost along the way. So, I did what I was trained to do. I buried it. I drowned it in work, in distractions, in anything that kept me from thinking too much. And when people brought up Jesus, I kept my mouth shut. What was I supposed to say? That I wanted to believe, but I just couldn't. That I envied people who had faith because they had something I didn't. Hope. I had my own way of dealing with things. My routine was simple. Wake up early, hit the gym, work my shift at the warehouse, come home, eat, spend time with my family, watch TV, go to bed, rinse and repeat. No real highs, no real lows, just existing. And then, everything changed. It was a Sunday, one of the few days I had off. I had spent the morning doing what I always did, sipping my black coffee while scrolling through the news, shaking my head at the state of the world. Another war brewing overseas, another corrupt politician caught in a lie, another tragedy that would be forgotten by next week. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Nothing ever changes. At some point, I felt an odd tightness in my chest, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and was slowly pulling. I ignored it. Probably just stress. I went about my day, running a few errands, grabbing lunch from my usual diner, and coming home to watch a football game on TV. But the tightness didn't go away. It got worse. It spread to my arms, my neck. A dull, burning ache. I shifted in my chair, trying to stretch it out. It didn't help. My breathing felt off, too shallow, too fast. Maybe I should lie down. The moment I stood up, the pain exploded. A crushing weight slammed into my chest, knocking the air from my lungs. I stumbled, gripping the edge of the couch. My vision blurred. The room spun. I tried to call for help, but no sound came out. My throat tightened. My heart pounded erratically, like a drum losing its rhythm. Then, all at once, a terrifying realization hit me. This is it. I'm dying. Panic surged through me, but my body was shutting down. My legs buckled. The floor rushed up to meet me, and as my head hit the ground, everything went black. Darkness. For a moment, there was nothing. No pain, no sound, no thoughts, just an empty void. It felt like floating in deep space, weightless and disconnected. Then, something shifted. A sharp electric jolt shot through me, like my body was being yanked in two directions at once. I heard something. Distant, muffled voices, frantic movement. A ringing in my ears. My mind fought to make sense of it. Then I felt an intense pain again. A crushing weight squeezed my chest as if an iron vice was clamping down on my ribs. My lungs burned. My heart hammered wildly, struggling against some invisible force. Every nerve in my body screamed. I gasped, or at least I tried to. But the air wouldn't come. I realized I was lying on the floor, my body rigid and trembling. My fingers twitched. My vision flickered in and out like a bad signal on an old TV. Voices, urgent, nearby. Can you hear me? I wanted to answer, to tell them I was still here, that I wasn't ready to go. But my mouth wouldn't move. My limbs were useless, as if they no longer belonged to me. Then, more pressure. A brutal force slammed against my chest, once, twice, again. Someone was performing CPR. Come on! Stay with us! A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. My mind latched onto it like a lifeline. Good. They're coming. Just hold on. But deep down, I knew. Something inside me was already slipping away. My heartbeat, once frantic and erratic, now felt distant. Slower. Weaker. Like a drum beat fading into the horizon. The voices around me blurred together. The room darkened. My body felt heavy. Too heavy. And then suddenly, the weight lifted. The pain stopped. The fear, the struggle, the desperate fight to hold on, it all vanished in an instant. I felt light. That's when I saw it. I was still on the floor, but somehow I wasn't. I was above it, looking down at my own body. My chest rose and fell in short, shallow movements. Paramedics were kneeling beside me, one pumping my chest, the other preparing a defibrillator. Charging, clear. My body jerked violently as they shocked me, but I felt nothing. No pain, no connection to it at all. I should have panicked. I should have been terrified, screaming, "What the hell is happening?" But I wasn't. A strange calm settled over me, a peace unlike anything I had ever known. It was then that I realized I wasn't breathing. My heart wasn't beating. I was dead. Yet I was still aware. Still me. I hovered there, watching as the paramedics worked tirelessly, oblivious to the fact that I was standing right above them. I could see every detail. One of them had a bead of sweat rolling down his temple, his gloved hands steady despite the urgency of the situation. The other had a small scar on his wrist, partially hidden beneath his uniform sleeve. It was all too real. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't some hallucination. I was outside my body. And then I felt it. A presence behind me. Warmth spread across my back, like stepping into the sun after a lifetime in the cold. It wasn't just warmth. It was power, vast and uncontainable, yet gentle, familiar and completely beyond anything I had ever known. Slowly, I turned around, and that's when I saw the light. It wasn't like any light on Earth. It wasn't just bright. It was alive. It pulsed, moved, breathed, stretching endlessly in all directions, wrapping me in its presence. And in that moment, a thought, not my own, but placed inside me as if it had always been there, whispered through my very being. Come. I knew without a doubt that I was being called. I was being taken. And wherever I was going, there would be no coming back. The light pulled at me, not with force, but with an irresistible invitation. It was unlike anything I had ever known. There were no words spoken aloud, yet I understood its call. It wasn't just light, it was alive, and it was drawing me in. I turned my gaze back to the scene below. My body lay there, lifeless. The paramedics worked frantically, their faces tight with concentration. The room was a blur of motion, EMTs shouting medical jargon, my wife sobbing nearby, my son gripping his mother's arm, his face pale with shock. It should have been horrifying, but strangely, it wasn't. I felt no pain, no fear, no attachment to that body anymore. I was free. Suddenly, a new awareness filled me, a presence beside me, powerful yet calm. Slowly, I turned my head, and there he was, an angel standing in the light. I don't know how I recognized him as one. There were no wings, no shining armor, none of the images I had seen in church paintings. But he was beyond human, tall, radiant, his very form seeming to pulse with energy and authority. His eyes locked onto mine, and in them I saw everything: infinite knowledge, deep sorrow, and something else. Purpose. "It is time," he said. His voice wasn't heard with ears, but felt deep inside my soul. I hesitated. Time for what? I wasn't afraid, but a part of me still clung to the life I had left behind. My wife, my son, my unfinished days. Would I just disappear? Would they ever know that I was okay? I glanced down again. The paramedics' voices grew more desperate. "We're losing him." One of them grabbed the defibrillator paddles. "Clear!" A powerful jolt surged through my body, making it arch off the floor. My wife let out a strangled sob, but I felt nothing. The angel extended his hand. "Come." Something inside me knew. If I took his hand, there would be no going back. I hesitated again, and then the light spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in a way that every part of me understood. "You have a question." The truth of it struck me instantly. Yes, I do. A question I had buried deep inside me for years. A question I had been too afraid to ask out loud. One that had lingered in the back of my mind during late-night conversations with fellow soldiers, whispered in foxholes, asked in the silence of my own thoughts when I saw too much death, too much suffering. Was Jesus really your son? It had haunted me. Through war, through loss, through years of trying to reconcile faith with the reality I had lived. And now, in this moment between life and eternity, I was finally asking it. The angel's expression remained unreadable, but the light, it responded. I felt a shift, time itself bending, reality folding. The room around me faded, and suddenly I was no longer floating over my body. I was somewhere else. A vast expanse stretched before me, neither earth nor heaven, yet more real than anything I had ever known. It wasn't empty. It was full of something, a presence so overwhelming that my soul trembled. And then I saw him. Not the angel, not the light, but him. A figure stood before me, radiating a presence so powerful that my very being shook. It wasn't just light, it was glory. A brilliance that should have blinded me, yet I saw clearer than ever. He stepped forward, and in that instant, I knew. My question, one that had tormented me, kept me awake at night, left me searching for answers through war, pain, and doubt, was about to be answered. And I wasn't ready for it. I couldn't move. Not because I was suffocating, but because the sheer magnitude of his presence consumed everything. The figure before me wasn't just standing in the light. He was the light. It radiated from him, not like the glow of a candle or the harsh glare of the sun, but something alive, a presence that filled every space, every thought, every part of me. And yet, I wasn't afraid. I should have been. I had spent my life questioning, doubting, even cursing him at times. But as he stepped forward, I felt something I never expected: love, pure, undiluted, unfiltered. A love so overwhelming it made me want to collapse at his feet and weep. My soul knew who he was before my mind could even process it. God. He didn't need to say a word. Every fiber of my being recognized him. It wasn't just knowledge, it was truth revealed at the deepest level of my existence. Then God spoke. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't condemning. It wasn't full of rage, but it was absolute. What do you seek? The words cut through me, deeper than any wound I had ever suffered. What did I seek? I had spent years asking questions, looking for answers in war, in alcohol, in isolation. I had searched for truth, but had I ever really wanted it? Or had I only been looking for an excuse not to believe? And yet, I had one question left, the same question that had haunted me for years. My voice, barely more than a whisper, escaped my lips. Was Jesus really your son? A silence followed. Not just the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that carried infinite weight. The throne before me pulsed with an intensity I could barely withstand. The air itself held a weight beyond anything I had ever known. Every fiber of my being trembled, as if reality itself was bracing for the answer. And then, God spoke. His voice was not like before. This time, it was absolute, unshakable, eternal. Jesus is my son. The force of those words ripped through existence itself. I wasn't just hearing them, I was experiencing them. The sheer power behind those words surged through my very essence, shaking the foundations of who I was. Then, as if the heavens themselves were peeling open, visions filled my mind. I saw something I could barely comprehend. The beginning of everything. Before the earth, before time, before creation itself. A realm of pure light and infinite majesty stretched before me, beyond the limits of human understanding. I saw God the Father, seated in unmatched glory, and beside him, Jesus. But he wasn't just a man, he was before time itself. Jesus wasn't created, he wasn't just a prophet or a teacher, he was. He existed before anything else. The radiance of his being was intertwined with the very essence of the Father. He wasn't separate from God, he was God. And at that moment, I understood. This wasn't something that could be debated. This wasn't something that could be debated. Jesus was the Son of God. He had always been. The vision shifted, and I saw the fall. Darkness crept into the vision. I saw the creation of the earth, perfect and untainted. I saw the first humans, Adam and Eve, walking in harmony with their Creator, and then the deception, a lie whispered into their hearts, a choice made in defiance, and suddenly everything changed. A rift appeared, a chasm so vast, so severe, that mankind was forever separated from the presence of God. I saw the centuries unfold, the weight of sin crushing humanity, war, hatred, despair. Mankind was doomed. And then I saw Jesus step forward. I saw the plan that had been set in motion before time itself. Jesus, the eternal Son of God, chose to leave his throne. I saw him enter the world, not as a conquering king, but as a helpless infant, born into poverty, into suffering. And then the vision shifted. I saw Jesus walking among the broken, healing the sick, restoring the outcasts, speaking words of life. Then came the betrayal, the mockery, the agony of the cross. I saw the nails driven into his hands, the blood dripping from his brow. I heard the mocking laughter of those who had rejected him, and yet he endured it all, for me, for all of us. Tears filled my eyes as I watched him gasp for breath, as he took upon himself every sin, every failure, every broken soul. And yet, he didn't resist. He could have called down legions of angels. He could have ended it all with a single word. But he stayed. For us. For me. For every sinner who had ever lived. Jesus wasn't just another man who had been crucified. He was the sacrifice, the Lamb of God, the bridge between a fallen world and a holy God. And in that moment, I understood. There was no other way. There were no many paths to God. There was no all religions lead to the same place. There was only one way: Jesus. Next, I saw a very bright light, brighter than anything I had ever seen. I saw the tomb empty. I saw Jesus, alive. The darkness that had tried to claim the world was shattered. Death itself had been defeated. And then, as the vision expanded, I saw something that left me in absolute terror. I saw what happened to those who rejected this truth. My spirit was yanked away from the beauty of the resurrection, pulled into another vision. And this time, it was horrifying. I saw people standing before the throne of God, just as I was now. But they weren't bowing in worship. They were trembling in terror. And then I heard their cries. "Lord, Lord, did we not do good works in your name? Did we not live decent lives? Did we not follow our own path to you?" And then God spoke again. "I never knew you. Depart from me." The weight of those words crushed everything around them. I watched as those who had rejected the truth, those who had dismissed Jesus as just another teacher, were cast into darkness. The horror of it sent a cold wave through my soul. They had chosen this. They had heard the truth and walked away. And now, there was no turning back. I turned, desperate to escape the vision, to shut it out. And then, I found myself once again before the throne. My entire being trembled, and I knew I had the answer to my question. God's voice thundered one final time. "You have seen the truth." I felt the weight of those words settle upon me. No more doubt, no more excuses, no more lies. Jesus was not just another man. He was not just a prophet. God looked at me, and then he spoke. His voice wasn't just sound. It was life itself. "You have always searched for truth, James." My breath caught. He knew my name. Of course he did. "You fought wars on this earth, but the greatest battle has always been for your soul. You asked if Jesus was truly the Son of God. Now you see. Now you understand." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Yes, I do. But knowing is not enough. You must choose. A weight settled in my chest. Choose. I had already chosen. I believed now. Wasn't that enough? But in an instant, I understood. It wasn't just about belief. It was about surrender. I could believe in him all I wanted, but would I follow him? Would I trust him? Would I let go of my pride, my doubts, my stubbornness? Would I truly give him my life? He reached out his hand. And in that moment, I knew. This was the most important decision I would ever make. My whole body trembled as I stared at his outstretched hand. This wasn't a casual invitation. It wasn't a demand either. It was something much deeper, a choice that would determine everything. Tears blurred my vision. I had always thought of religion as a human construct, something people made up to feel better about the unknown. But now, I saw it. Jesus was never about religion. He was the truth itself. And the forces of darkness are doing everything in their power to bury that truth. I had spent my life questioning, wondering if Jesus was truly the Son of God, wondering if I had been lied to by preachers, scholars, history books. But I had been looking in the wrong place. The real deception wasn't in people trying to convince me that he was the Son of God. The real deception was in those trying to convince me that he wasn't. I looked up at him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you showing me this?" His eyes were filled with both sorrow and love. "Because you asked," he said, "and because now you must tell them." A lump formed in my throat. Tell who? Who would even believe me? My mind was spinning, overwhelmed by everything I had just seen. But deep down, I already knew. I had been given the truth. And now, I would have to decide what to do with it. I was still trying to process what I had just seen when everything around me shifted again. The radiant light of God remained, but the peace I had felt earlier began to thin, like fog dissipating under a harsh wind. A new presence entered the space, not one of love, but of opposition. I felt it before I saw it. A heaviness pressed against me, like an unseen force trying to push me back, suffocate me, silence me. Then, a voice. Not like Jesus' voice. No warmth, no authority, no love. This one was cold, slithering, like a whisper dripping with poison. "You don't have to say anything." I tensed. "No one will believe you." The words slithered into my mind, twisting themselves into my thoughts like a parasite. "You'll sound crazy. You'll lose everything. Just stay silent." I looked toward God, but his expression didn't change. He wasn't surprised. He simply watched, allowing me to see the battle I had just stepped into. A war that had been raging long before I was born. And now, I was in it. Before I could react, I was pulled again, falling. Everything blurred around me, and in an instant, I was back in my body. The first thing I felt was pain. My chest burned, my lungs heaved, and the harsh fluorescent lights above me stabbed into my eyes. I was alive. I had returned. But nothing was the same. I gasped for breath, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The hospital room was filled with movement. Nurses adjusting IVs, machines beeping, my wife gripping my hand so tightly her knuckles were white. "James," she sobbed. "Oh God, you're back." Tears ran down her face as she kissed my forehead, her body trembling. The doctor was speaking, something about how I was brought in dead, how my heart had stopped, how they had no explanation for why I had come back. But I wasn't listening, because I remembered everything, every word God had spoken, every horrifying truth I had been shown. And suddenly, I understood the weight of it all. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed, unable to sleep, I felt it again. That presence. It was different now, not like God's presence, not like the overwhelming love I had felt in his light. This was something else, something dark. I was being watched. I turned my head slowly, my pulse spiking. And then I saw it, a shadow. It wasn't cast by the hospital lights. It didn't belong to anyone in the room. It stood in the corner, still and unnatural, as if the darkness itself had taken form. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a dream. It wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. I could feel it. And then, just as suddenly as I had noticed it, it moved. A whisper, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Stay silent." I shut my eyes, my heart pounding. I knew what this was. The battle hadn't ended when I returned to my body. It had only just begun. In the days that followed, the attacks intensified. It wasn't just the shadow. It was the world itself. When I tried to tell my wife about what I had seen, she looked at me with pity. "James, honey, it was just a dream," she said softly, squeezing my hand. "You were unconscious for a long time. Your brain was deprived of oxygen. It's normal to hallucinate." My own wife, the woman who had prayed for my life, the woman who loved me, didn't believe me. Neither did the doctors. Neither did my closest friends. No one wanted to believe. And yet, as I tried to move on, I could feel the resistance growing stronger. Technology glitched. My phone randomly shut off when I tried to write down what I had seen. Emails I attempted to send about my experience would disappear before they could be delivered. I started receiving strange calls, numbers I didn't recognize, but every time I answered there was only silence, and at night, the shadows returned, always watching, and always whispering, "No one will believe you. You will lose everything. Stay silent." I had never believed in spiritual warfare before, but now I was living it, and I finally understood. The world wasn't just indifferent to the truth. It was actively fighting against it. I had asked God if Jesus was truly his son, and I had received my answer. Now the question was, how am I going to share it? I sat alone in my hospital bed, staring at the blank wall, my mind tangled in everything I had seen. The resistance I was facing wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about my life or my testimony. It was bigger than that. I had seen the battle in the spiritual realm. I had seen the truth. And now something, or someone, was trying to keep me from sharing it. I gritted my teeth. "Stay silent." The words of the shadow echoed in my head. "No one will believe you." But I couldn't stay silent. I wouldn't. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temples. "God," I whispered. "What am I supposed to do? What do you want me to say?" And then the room shifted again. Suddenly, I was no longer in my hospital bed. I was somewhere else. I found myself standing on what looked like the edge of a great cliff, overlooking the world. But the world below me. It was burning. Thick black smoke rose from cities. Fires devoured everything in their path. I saw buildings crumble as if struck by an invisible force. And then the ground shook. Not just an ordinary earthquake. This was something greater. It was like the earth itself was groaning. Screams rang out from below. People ran in every direction, searching for shelter, searching for safety. But there was none. I turned to my left, and my heart clenched. A massive wave, a tsunami taller than the highest skyscrapers, rose in the distance, swallowing entire cities in a single moment. To my right, the sky split open, revealing something even more terrifying. I saw bodies, people, millions of them, being pulled toward the darkness, screaming as they were dragged into what I could only describe as a void. I felt my knees go weak. "God, what is this?" I whispered. And then I saw him. Jesus stood beside me, his expression full of grief. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the world fall apart. "My people do not listen," he said softly. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't filled with rage. It was filled with sorrow. They have turned away. They have chosen their own path. I turned back to the destruction below. "Is this the end?" I asked, my throat dry. Jesus didn't answer right away. Instead, he stretched out his hand. And suddenly, I saw something else. Amidst the chaos, amidst the destruction, a great light appeared. It started small, just a flicker, barely visible against the darkness. But then, it grew. It spread across the world, touching people, awakening them. I saw faces changing, eyes being opened, hands being raised toward the heavens, people falling to their knees in repentance, crying out to God. A revival, a great awakening. But it was not for everyone. Many resisted. Many rejected the truth, even as the world crumbled around them. And then Jesus spoke to me. "Time is running out," he said. "The world must be shaken before it can be restored." I turned to look at him, my heart pounding. "What do you want me to do?" Jesus met my gaze. "Tell them." His voice was firm, unwavering. "Tell them what you have seen. Tell them what you know. Some will listen. Some will wake up. Others will refuse. But the choice must be theirs." He took a step closer, and I felt the weight of his presence. "But you must speak." I swallowed hard. "But they don't believe me. They think I'm crazy." Jesus' expression didn't change. "They did not believe me either," he said. His words cut deep, piercing through my fear, through my doubts. He had come to this world with the truth, and they had rejected him. Why should I expect anything different? But that didn't mean I could stay silent. That didn't mean I could walk away. Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, and in that moment, I felt it. Strength. Not my own, his. And then, just like that, the vision ended. I was back in my hospital bed, my heart racing, my hands shaking. This time I met Jesus himself, and I knew what I had to do. The world was running out of time, and I had been given a mission. I had to warn them, even if they didn't believe me, even if they called me crazy, even if the darkness tried to stop me. Because this wasn't just about me. This was about eternity. The next day, I sat in my hospital bed, gripping the thin blanket between my fingers, my entire body trembling from what I had just seen. The weight of it all pressed down on me. The destruction, the darkness, the revival, and Jesus' words, "Tell them." But how? How was I supposed to tell people something so massive, so terrifying, so unbelievable? I had already seen how the world reacted to truth. Doubt, mockery, indifference. People refused to believe even when the evidence was right in front of them. Would they listen to me, a broken war veteran with scars both inside and out? Or would they write me off as just another crazy man who had seen the light during a near-death experience? I clenched my jaw. It didn't matter, because this wasn't about me. It was about them, and I had seen too much to walk away in silence. The next morning, my doctor came in, flipping through his clipboard with a look of disbelief. "James, I don't know how to explain it," he said, shaking his head. "But you're recovering fast, faster than we expected. The internal bleeding is stopping. Your vitals are strong. It's like..." He hesitated. "It's like you got a second chance at life." A second chance. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a second chance at life. This was a mission. I had been brought back for a reason. As soon as the doctor left, I reached for my phone, ignoring the sharp pain in my ribs. I had to start somewhere. So I called the first person I could think of, David, my closest friend from the military. He picked up on the second ring. "James?" His voice was cautious. "Man, I just heard what happened. You okay?" I hesitated. I could have told him the easy answer. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just recovering." But that would have been a lie, because I wasn't okay. I had seen something that changed me forever, and I had to tell him. "David," I said slowly, my throat tightening. "I died." Silence. Then a small, nervous chuckle. "What?" "I died," I repeated. "And I saw something, man. I saw Jesus. I saw the world, our world, falling apart. And he told me to warn people. He told me to tell them the truth." Another pause. "James," David said carefully, "maybe you should rest. You've been through a lot." "No," I cut him off. "I need you to listen." I could hear the tension in his breathing. I could hear the doubt creeping in. But I pushed forward anyway. I told him everything. The light, the throne room, the moment I asked God if Jesus was really his son, and his terrifying response. I told him about the shadow that had tried to silence me, the resistance, the spiritual war, and finally, the vision of the end. By the time I finished, I could hear David exhaling sharply on the other end. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, he whispered, "James, what are you saying?" I closed my eyes. "I'm saying that everything we thought we knew, everything the world has tried to deny, it's all real. Jesus is real, hell is real, and time is running out." His breathing grew unsteady. I don't know what to say, man." "You don't have to say anything," I told him. "Just listen. Just think. Just pray." Silence. Then, finally, "I will." It wasn't a full commitment, but it was something, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, I started telling more people. At first, it was just my family, then a few old friends, then people at my local church. And with every conversation, I saw the same pattern. Some believed. Their eyes filled with tears as they realized the truth. Some doubted. They nodded politely, but dismissed my words as the ramblings of a man who had seen too much war. And some resisted. They laughed in my face, mocked me, called me crazy, and for a moment I almost let it discourage me. But then I remembered Jesus' words. They did not believe me either. This was never going to be easy, but I couldn't stop, because I knew what was coming. And if even one person turned to Jesus because of my testimony, then it was worth it. So now, I'm telling you, yes, you, the one listening to this. This message isn't just for the people I know. It's for everyone. It's for those who are searching. It's for those who are doubting. It's for those who think they have all the time in the world. But you don't. Time is running out. The world is changing. The war between light and darkness is already happening. And Jesus is calling you. So I'll ask you what I asked David. What are you going to do? Are you going to ignore this? Are you going to brush it off as just another story? Or are you going to listen? Are you going to wake up? Are you going to seek the truth before it's too late? The choice is yours. But whatever you do, don't stay silent. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Everything is about to change. And now, you must choose. Jesus said, "Whoever is not with me is against me." Matthew 12:30. There is no middle ground. To stay silent is to take a side. To ignore the truth is to reject it. The warnings have been given. The signs are all around us. Those who have eyes to see, see. Those who have ears to hear, listen. But the choice remains yours.